Welcome back. On today's episode of Contested, we'll start off with your favor recap and then give you our thoughts on both tournaments from this weekend.
Then we'll look at the freshly announced Overwatch League break, along with the return of the tournament formats.
I'm Jayne, this is Avast, and welcome to Contested. What's up, guys? Welcome to your Tuesday episode of Contested. Once again, we are not live from the Frontier Communications Studios, but this is going to be the last week that I ever have to say that line ever again, because the office is opening back up, and soon we're
Is it next week, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was like the week after next week. Wow, time has been flying.
Time has been flying. Yeah, and my Melee tournament happened this weekend, so going to have lots to talk about there. And then after that, there's a break, and they're apparently like these formats so much that we're going to be seeing more of that. So we'll talk about all that and more. But to start things off, of course, if you were living under a rock, we have the favor a 60-second recap in order to bring you up to speed. Spoiler warning. Welcome to your favor 60-second recap. Unless you live under a rock, you watched the first of the Overwatch League's regional tournaments in the form of the May Melee this weekend. And if you do live under a rock, then I feel bad for you because there were some awesome games of Overwatch all weekend long. In the Asia region, the Chengdu Hunters gave the New York Excelsior a run for their money in a really close 5-game series, and then the Seoul Dynasty first surprised not only the Spark, but then even the Charge in the semifinals in order to catapult themselves all the way to the finals against the Shanghai Dragons. The finals went the full distance, with the Seoul Dynasty first taking 3 maps, and then the Shanghai Dragons pulling off the 4-map reverse sweep to win 4-3 in the most intense nail-biter of a match I think we've seen all year. On the American side of the bracket, there were too many great games to mention them all here and now, but the Mayhem managed to upset the Philadelphia Fusion after looking extremely dominant all tournament long, spearheaded by Yaki on Tracer. The San Francisco Shock, however, returned to their championship form and managed to stop them in the finals 4-2. We'll talk more about both of the brackets during today's episode, but I think one of the cool things to mention is how neat it is to have teams that have historically struggled, such as the Florida Mayhem and the Shanghai Dragons, playing in the finals of their respective tournaments. Tell that to someone a year or two ago, and they might just laugh at you. It's pretty cool to see.
Very nice. I was a big fan of it again. Concise, beautiful, gorgeous.
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 I have no idea if it's timely, though. You know, that we call it the favor 60-second recap, but I don't think I've ever timed myself. I'm sure it's probably closer to like a 600-second recap, but you know, you try
They
and
said
fit in
63 seconds in chat.
63 seconds?
You were pretty close.
Did I nail that? Wow.
You nailed that right on the head. Jayne and Avast are a part of Team Envy. Welcome from your time capsule, friend. Welcome to the year 2020.
The year
We have
of our
many
Lord.
new things here. Many
Yes.
new things here this year. And I'm glad you're here with us. But yes, that is correct.
Oh, yeah, no, like there was 36 hours of Overwatch this weekend, I think it was. 36 in total.
It was a
between both.
lot. It was a lot. I was looking at I didn't realize just like the full, I mean, I did realize, but just the full scale of matches that happened. Like on one day, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 matches in a single day.
Yeah.
Between the two regions, and then like there was still like 6 to 5 like every day after that. It was
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
You know, I feel guilty because I still haven't watched the entire Seoul Dynasty versus the Shanghai Dragons map. I didn't watch many of the Asian matches, and I've skipped 3 of the American matches. It's so many matches to watch.
It's an insane amount.
Yeah, it's crazy. I enjoyed quite a few of the American matches. You know, the ones that I expected to be blowouts mostly were, so I didn't feel bad about missing them. I think the only one that was close that I elected not to watch, I think, was one of the Valiant matches, actually. I can't remember it right off the top of my head. Let me see if I can quickly find it. Yeah, I missed the Paris like the Paris Eternal versus the Los Angeles Valiant match, and that was only kind of the close one that I skipped. So I was sad about that one, but yeah, I don't know. Paris Eternal weren't looking as good considering they also went to Game 5 against the Boston Uprising. But
yeah, or that just be Boston being better too.
Yeah,
you know?
true.
Could be a little bit of both. But we
Yeah,
got to talk about the Asia region first, Jayne. Before
Okay,
we devolve into that, let's segment ourselves, right? Let's segment ourselves, or else we're gonna go crazy. We're both long monologuers, okay? And then we'll get lost in the minutia, 100%. But Asia region first. Number one thing for me, by far, I think we're on agreement, is Shanghai having a 4-map reverse sweep after being
what is
down
that?
3 versus the Dynasty.
Yeah. I mean, that's insane. First of all, like we were having it was probably, I think, one of the areas that we disagreed. We had one major disagreement on the Asian bracket between the two of
Yeah.
us, and it was whether or not the Spark or the Dynasty were going to win. And not
You
to
were right.
rub it, not
You were right.
I was
No,
right.
you were right.
You got the spread right on the North American side, but I got the Asian
Yeah.
prediction right. So, but not only did this whole Dynasty end up managing to beat the Spark, but they also then smashed the Charge. So that was also one of the predictions that we thought was rather unrealistic, in the fact that we thought the Charge was almost absolutely going to make it in the finals. But then Shanghai Dragons, we always knew they were strong. Very consistent team. They look very well coached and polished. You know, the only times they've really struggled are when things get a little bit chaotic and they go off script. But you know, their ability to really go the distance, their adaptation, it was really, really, I think, is a testament more along to the team. And I don't even have to have watched the match, which I'm definitely going to. You know, other than the ridiculous C9 that I heard.
It was
happened.
disgustingly bad. I mean, they said so pretty much. I mean, Li Gong explained there's, and it's crazy that Shanghai did it again. That this is the organization do it again, because they also had one of the other worst C9s in history of the Overwatch League, which was the one on Dorado of season 2, where Youngjin like just peepo left the cart.
That
And
was
just
Dorado
like,
second, right? The very
yeah,
start of
no,
Dorado
I
second.
think it was the very start. Yeah, they had just kept first.
Yeah.
And it was
remember that one.
disgustingly bad. Disgustingly bad. And this one was also, it was less tragic because I think it was far less impactful for the overall series, because they were playing for a draw at that point.
Yeah.
But I think Li Gong explained where like they had heard that Fleta was so low that they all turned to help him, and in return they all just like left the card. And then it was just not good. I heard Sideshow and Bryn's souls leave their body as they casted that. Like, it was forcibly expelled. It was disgusting.
And the actual match, like we were mentioning it during the pre-show, but I actually looked up the exact time, and the match between the Seoul Dynasty and the Shanghai Dragons took 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Yep, about 3.
2 hours and 50 minutes start to finish. So that is a lot of Overwatch, and that was immediately, like, they played games before that, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So I mean, that's a long day, and just simply the stamina of the Shanghai Dragons to be able to pull it back. Like, I can't.
Yeah, they played versus New York, and the New York game was disgusting. All the New York games were actually disgusting, like, in my opinion. Like, New York looked really, really bad. Really so abysmally bad that I actually want to purge it from my memory and just be like, no. Like, let's just pretend those matches never happened, because I want to take the stone tablets and just chisel it away, because it was so unbelievably bad how they looked.
I think the only thing that could have made me smugger about New York's performance, if they did actually manage to drop the game to the Chengdu Hunters, if that had happened, I would have had just, man, I would have been smugging about that for literally the entire year. But no, the Chengdu Hunters took them to Game 5. And, I've never really been high on the New York Excelsior, and it doesn't really surprise me that they were struggling, especially compared to some of these Asian teams that are actually looking really, really quite strong. So, I haven't looked at the games in depth from New York, so I don't know exactly kind of where they're actually struggling. But yeah, it doesn't break my heart to see them a little struggle a little bit.
Someone literally just said, "Don't do it, Jayne. Don't do it," and then he immediately did it. Immediately upon. I'm also the other takeaway I have to say from the Asia region in response to North America is that 100% regional meta is sort of a divergence. We saw a lot of double shield and Rhine sort of styles for North America. Asia, there was a lot more dive, just way more dive. There's still dive in North America, but it was a lot more dive centric within the APAC region. And secondly, is that I hate Seoul Dynasty. That's the second thing that we can take away from there.
Why do you hate?
I hate Seoul Dynasty because they make no sense. They make no sense.
I mean, yes,
at all.
That's absolutely true. Like, the fact that like, I really kind of empathize with Reinforce's approach when he was actually predicting this, and I think that it was him and I had kind of like very similar mentalities here, and the fact that Johnny predicted that Seoul Dynasty was going to be the dark horse of the tournament that had the potential to win it. I didn't go so far to think that the Seoul Dynasty had the potential to win the tournament, but I thought that they were going to do a lot better than predicted. I thought that they were going to beat the Spark. I thought that they at least had a chance against the Charge. Didn't think that they would actually beat the Charge. But, despite that, like, Reinforce himself in his own power rankings had Seoul Dynasty at 7th, and he still had them listed as kind of the dark horse, the potential finalist, potential winner sort of thing. And I'm right up there with him. You know, we've had such ridiculous fluctuations in ability within this one team in such like small time frames. You know, we had that 3-game 9 map win streak, and then they got the same thing on the other side. They just dropped every single map. We're doing ridiculous things with their tank lineups, and they just looked absolutely horrific. And then they come back and flip to the other side of the power rankings again, and almost take it against the Shanghai Dragons, which have been looking incredibly well polished, pretty consistently compared to the Seoul Dynasties. Yeah, so the Seoul Dynasty are very infuriating, and it's super hard to tell kind of which Seoul Dynasty is going to show up. It's like, if it's the good Seoul Dynasty, they're winning everything. If it's bad Seoul Dynasty, they're out in the first round. And so far, I don't think there's any real external reason that we can find that indicates which Seoul Dynasty is actually going to be showing up.
I think probably one of the only key barometers is if Prophet has to play Echo or not. If Prophet has to play Echo, then I think Bad Soul is much more likely to appear. It's like a probability of like, it's like plus or minus X amount of like, if Prophet on Echo, Soul will suddenly just crap the bed, because like otherwise they're pretty like, because I think I myself levied this criticism too. Is like, I think they were very double shield oriented to start,
Yeah.
especially if they play Marvel on Diva over Michelle. And
Yeah.
I was like, why? But they got to play dive a little bit more during the tournament and before the tournament, and they're actually looking a lot better, which would make sense if you look at the core of the roster. But then we've seen them play dive previously, and it was awful. So like, they're just getting hit with the orb of confusion at random times to figure out like when they're going to play good. But I think the Prophet Echo is a very clear weak point for Seoul currently, and something that has to be shored up if we're moving forward. And Echo continues to be like a staple of rotate, especially in the rotation of the DPS play and your flex DPS play. Because there's a lot of Echoes that are just straight pounding right now and are hugely impactful for their team, including players like Yaki, obviously Rascal. There's so many good Echoes, and Prophet falls short a lot of the time.
And Echo, I think, is a character right now that we are seeing to be quite effective with less support from the team. Echo is certainly a play style right now that doesn't require a lot of support from the team, and it's extremely independent character. Even players like Dante, I think Dante is probably the most shocking standout performance of Echo to me. Rascal is when I started seeing how Echo is being effective, I was like, who I really want to see on this hero? It's like, I want to see Rascal on this hero. Having seen and watched and analyzed Rascal's Genji play, I'm like, I mean, this is going to be like tailor fit for Rascal to just be a monster on this hero. Watching him with the shock, I was like, yep. And I was so excited to see. Yep, shock. It's like Rascal's just kicking ass. And then, Dante, despite the Houston Outlaws being a little bit weaker, Dante was putting out incredible performances. And at the same time, the Fuel was doing quite well, but I think Doha actually struggled to a surprising amount. So it is kind of like a weird thing to see really standout DPS players like Prophet, like Doha, both of them struggling on this hero, and I haven't really quite figured out what's causing some of these otherwise superstar DPS players to really struggle picking up the hero.
I mean, I think a large portion of Echo as well, that can sometimes hurt teams. In particular, I think most notably like players like Prophet and Doha, is that I think Echo is a lot more team coordinated than Tracer or even Sombra at times. Which sounds weird on paper because you're like, okay, dive, like it should always be very coordinated, but Echo is I think on average a lot more vulnerable than both of those heroes. Like, there are certain heroes that will straight up eat Echo's lunch money. They'll regurgitate it back to show them the lunch money, then eat it again. And because like heroes like McCree, heroes like Diva, like those sort of heroes can actually completely destroy Echo if you don't have the coordination required to play around it. And I think that's where teams like Dallas or even teams like Seoul sometimes fall short, is that Dallas, it's kind of evident when we watch them play that they do not make it as far as they do without their DPS players just actually going full Atlas and lifting the world upon their shoulders and be like, we are not losing this game. Like Mr. Frodo, we're going to Mordor. Like, it's not happening. I'll have to carry you. And then the same goes for a lesser extent for Seoul, in that they are very, very frag heavy, and they're really built upon that explosive power that they have. And it's clear that having that larger coordination that might be required for Echo sometimes hurts them, especially since Prophet is probably so set in his like play style that Echo
Yeah.
Because also Echo is almost like a Tracer and a Pharah combined,
Yes.
where you need that support, And I don't think Prophet ever really needed that before.
Yeah, I think if I were to take a guess as to what was struggling the most, just because I like looking at Doha as an example, for example, um, Dallas Fuel has always been an extremely reactive team, whereas you see play styles like Dante, who is extremely focused on kind of the assassination, using the basically lack of audio, for him to just be silently above a team, drop down, and then just instantly assassinate somebody with the actual sticky bombs and then the execution beam. I do think that Echo's assassination ability was surprisingly higher than I had predicted it to be, and I think that did come out to be uh, far and away the most powerful playstyle for Echo in the tournament. I definitely think that it came out. It's like the Echoes that were playing this were threatening this. If you,
Yeah.
especially against this more poke heavy composition, against Echo, against Ash, against Baptiste, against Zen, these targets are things that they have to kind of keep eyes on Echo, because at any point she can decide to just come down, sticky bomb, execute, and then she also has an escape. If she was already at the skybox as well.
And a
So
and a second life with her
yeah,
ult when she has it
I
up,
mean, yeah, I mean, her ultimate was,
A lot of
but
tools in the kit.
there were some people doing some interesting things with Echo. I definitely think that some of the Echo players, none come to mind immediately, but some people were doing quite a lot of duplicates on things like Ash and weren't getting nearly as much value. And I definitely thought that, Echo's ultimate was becoming to the point where if you duplicated something like a Sigma, a Rissa, lesser to a lesser extent Reinhardt, just because he was played less, it seemed very much like it was almost a guaranteed team fight. You didn't even really have to do anything super strategic with it. It was just like you had so many more resources, plus the tank ultimates themselves, that anytime the Echo had an ultimate, if she just went for the safe play, duplicating a tank, it felt like a win. But I think that the thing that surprised me most about the Echo use during the regional tournament was how many fight wins she commanded just through her surprise assassinations. And I think that a lot of the teams that were either caught off guard by this or were playing Echo in more of their kind of defensive stance really struggled. And I think that's
Mhm.
probably why. I'm not as sure about Profit, but Doha definitely seemed to be trying to kind of improvise and adapt during the games away from the style that it seemed like the Fuel scrimmed into the style that was quickly becoming apparent was the most powerful way to play Echo.
And also, well, it's because that assassin style is so strong, but you need the space to get that
Yes.
assassination off generally, and that's why I think Soul and Dallas both failed equally at that style sometimes, even though Soul obviously had more sustained success overall. Is that you need to have the space created, and you need to have the support given to the Echo, and I think Soul still has this moments where they just fall over and randomly forget like what they're supposed to be doing, and that's when your Echo gets left out to dry. And also, I mean, Prophet's Echo just wasn't getting the shots, which wasn't in right positions, wasn't hitting the shots that they needed to. Um, so it's a rough one. It's a rough
Yeah.
one overall for both those teams. But I think overall, all things considered, I'm happy that Seoul have done better because I was high on them before, and then I saw them beefing, and I was like, "Oh God, Soul, don't do it to me again." And then they come back, and I'm like, "Okay, so there's still hope for this team. It's just they have some clear weak points they need to iron out, but there is hope. There is overall hope with that squad, and within the Asia region in general. I think we've seen that there is just so much crazy potential within it, um, that I'm still kind of I'm still kind of big on my initial thing of I still think the Asia region, the APAC region is still overall better, but I'm starting to look at some of the evolutions within NA and be like, well, maybe like I mean Mayhem, I think is by far the
Yeah.
most obvious example. Like they carved an extremely specific play style and made it work, and they were incredible at it. Which I guess can just lead us into the NA tournament.
Yeah, I think we could definitely start there, especially with the Mayhem and the Fusion match. And I made the comment. It was almost like an instinctual comment after the Mayhem beat the Fusion, and the comment was, and my stream was really confused. But I said that like despite the Mayhem taking out the Fusion and moving on to the finals, I still felt like the Fusion were the better team. And I think that comes from like after trying, I said that I was like, but why do I think that? Why do I feel that? It's like they just proved in a game. Uh, Undeniably they won. They're the better team. That's how math works, right? But I think that Mayhem definitely found their play style, their composition, and they executed extremely well. It looked very polished, looked perfected, and they looked strong. Yaki looked dominant. That the tracer in that sort of composition is not something that you can very easily shut down without getting run over in other parts of the composition. And the Fusion have shown themselves to be a consistently high performer. They're very strong strategically, tactically, and they have fantastic players. I mean, you don't even have to mention anyone else other than Carpe. But they have Carpe, they have Alarm, great players, great strategies, tactics. They've had consistent performance, but I really feel like they had more in the tank that they didn't show. Like I feel like despite Mayhem beating the Fusion, the Mayhem were playing kind of like at peak performance, but I think the Fusion didn't really find their style or didn't execute as well as they could have. It just like it felt like they were a shadow of what they could be. So despite kind of during the tournament, the Florida Mayhem beating the Fusion, I think that I would still hold on to more Philadelphia Fusion stocks than I would Florida Mayhem. Also, just before I let you speak, Avast,
We can talk about ML7. Yeah.
ML7, thank you so much for the host, my friend. I hope you had a fantastic stream. Welcome, ML7 viewers. Welcome to Contested. This is the Team Envy channel, where we do, Avast and I do a Overwatch-related talk show on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So welcome. Currently, we are discussing the North American Melee bracket from this past weekend. So I hope you guys stick around and enjoy the conversation, and I hope you had a fantastic stream, ML7.
We also do Valorant stuff too. If you're interested in Valorant, we're expanding our content. We've already done one episode with Lando, who does Off the Break. So if you're interested in Valorant too, we'll probably be expanding to that area as well. So your one-stop shop for content here. That's us. We're merchants of content, and that's what we do.
Content.
And that's it.
Content.
And with each video piece I make, I get Mulder. And so you can watch me mauled in real time, and it's going to be really. Once I'm completely out of hair, completely smooth, that'll be the bingo.
You've got some catching up to do in that category, but
yeah.
Okay, so before we move on to the absolute rest of the bracket, what did you think about specifically the Mayhem versus the Fusion match?
Well, also someone said in chat as well, didn't talk about London feels bad, man, which I think is actually I do want to put before we move on to NA fully. I want to caveat London as a team. And it leads into C9 as an organization as well, is looking to be the definition, a lot of ways, of how successful esport teams are looking to be run in the future, in my view. And the same way goes for Valiant and Immortals heading forward potentially. And the reason for that is I think that because they took Dragons to map 5 in the APAC tournament. In May Melee. It took Dragons to map 5. There's a lot of room for them to continue to grow. These are all players that were like essentially tier 3 in Korea. There are very few actual established players on London. The most established at this point, I think, would maybe be like, they have like JMac, and you have Glister. Right? Yeah, and Glister, who are both very. But I do think that London has a lot of room to grow, and most importantly for me, is they've established a culture of these players are going to learn from established staff, and they're going to get better, and they're going to grow as players, and they did it cheaply. They did it very inexpensively. And we live in a world where, money, especially in esports, money is a very important thing with how teams operate. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially for the league, and C9 as an organization has sort of been trending that way for all the rosters. And London is no exception. And I actually think that roster, considering the resources allocated to it, is an exceptional success, all things considered. When we look at their monthly Melee, their May Melee tournament, I should say. I was about to say monthly Melee, like the Alienwares, but that's an entirely different tournament series. It's very long. The Ghost of ZP, well, not the Ghost of ZP. ZP is very much alive, but ZP is currently about to come in and say something about the monthly Melee. But I actually think London is a candidate everyone should be on the lookout for to get better. They're not there yet, but they have a lot of potential, and I feel that they're the design of the roster and how the organization in general is moving is like a very smart way to do esports. Mm-hmm. In my view. But now we can go back to NA. I can't remember who said it, but I saw very recently somebody was talking about how they were going to have to put more emphasis onto the actual staff and coaches. That's me.
That was your tweet?
That was literally my tweet.
Okay, well, yeah. I thought it was a good tweet. I thought it was a good take, and I'm super happy that the Overwatch League is at that point where these organizations are showing consistent success. I think it really does go down to like the performance of teams is absolutely top down. It's culture. It's way more than just pick up top performers, smash them into a team, and hope they win. And I think that whether you're looking at kind of I don't want to name names or anything like that, but yeah, you're definitely seeing some teams that are being consistent, even with people who had been considered their superstars leaving, and then you're seeing
Yeah.
other teams that are consistently underperforming despite what should be, just looking at the roster, kind of on paper, good teams, good players,
Hmm.
and you're not seeing that kind of performance. So it
Yeah,
is nice to see.
I definitely against that strategy before, I think, because like there's always a maturation period where sort of there has to matriculate like the staff, because I think staff lags behind player development generally in any esport. Any new game, the staff is going to lag behind on average. So some people think that it's going to become much more multi-game moving forward, where like you'll
Hmm.
have C staff travel from the game, which is very
Yeah.
possible. Um, but like I wasn't huge on going like very staff heavy with looking at like games like orgs before, but now I think I'm starting to get to the point where I can feel confident, or not confident, but at least more confident of like I like the staff. This staff has good results and has good reviews, and like I think they'll mold this roster to be good no matter what the players or the roster is going to be. You
Hmm.
know?
Do you know how NRG functions? Like, do they have any kind of coaches that work across multiple games? Because I've heard of two organizations. I won't say which ones because I'm not sure whether or not it's public or not. But two organizations that I know of, at least that each have an Overwatch League team, they have staff members who are branching out and going to be starting uh, esports teams in other games as well, other than Overwatch. So it is kind of, especially if you're going to have using Dallas Fuel, or rather Team Envy as an example, that there's a different head coach for Empire, there's a different head coach for Fuel, there's a different head coach for the Counter Strike team. But I am starting to hear about more franchises and teams just in general that are starting to have one head coach, or at least kind of one guy responsible for how the teams are operated in multiple different kinds of games.
Um, for NRG, I'm not certain, to be honest. I know that they have staff that handles multiple like roster moves, but that's much more of an administrative thing than it is
Hmm.
like a coaching thing, and that's pretty typical for every org, right? So as far as I'm aware, for like Shock, who is obviously under NRG, like they've really only had one person doing one thing. Like it's Krusty, and their, um, I think their GM is like Justin, I believe. I believe
Is
is his
that
name.
wow? Why can't I remember his name? It starts with a B, doesn't it? Bike Age?
But no, that's Jamie,
That's
and that is
Jamie.
his, and he is Bikeage, but he is much more of an NRG. Oh, Chris, not Justin. You're right. Justin is an agent now, so never mind. But yes, Chris Chung. You're right, Albert. Albert of the Florida Mayhem. The G. There he is. What's up,
Hello.
Albert?
How you doing, Albert?
The GM of the Florida Mayhem. But yeah, I think most orgs they have staff that uh handle like administrative staff, but I'm not sure about coaches. Very few actually have multi-game coaches as of yet. But
So,
I know the few that you're talking about.
so now that Albert is in chat, and first of all, congratulations on your fantastic showing during the tournament this past weekend. We'll wrap around all the way, and we were still waiting on your opinion about the Mayhem Fusion game.
Oh, excellent. Excellent loop. Good work wrangling.
We got
Good
all
work
the way
wrangling
back
me.
there.
Yeah, overall, I mean, I'll I'll say I was partially what my tweets last night was that people should, I think too many analysts in particular and creators and such, or broadcasters or coaches, like don't want to admit when they make a wrong call sometimes, because they think it will lessen their impact, it'll make people think like less of them. But I think I was pretty wrong on on Mayhem, though I don't think the historical data has shown differently, right? Because like they played a lot of very weak opponents. Um,
Yes,
like they played very weak opponents heading into the Melee. Like there is no doubt about that. They really
yeah.
did. And there have been other examples of teams that have performed well against weak opponents that really did poorly in other stronger like schedule strength of schedules. Most notably Justice from last, or Defiant from last year. Um, there's more on the top of my head. I have to come back to them. But there
we believe you.
there are definitely more of teams that perform well against bad opponents and do terribly later. Atlanta, yeah, but Atlanta is another great example. But this time, Mayhem just popped off.
Yeah,
There's
and,
no other
and
way to say it. They just popped off. They looked really great. Their composition was super unique, and it also gave me a lot of faith, in particular, for them moving forward, because I've stated the opinion that players moving to coaches are not always great. Like it is kind of a crapshoot if a player that's moving to a coaching role is good. And Kuki, who is an ex-player, is now the head coach for the Mayhem, and he actually seems to be identifying some really great things within that roster. They're picking comps that suit their style. They're picking very interesting comps that are hard to counter within their style, and they seem to be very focused as a unit. So I do think that we have to have a lot of confidence in Mayhem going forward, not just for the performance here, but also just generally seeing like when we analyze all the trends of how they're playing. This shows to me a very competent coaching staff.
Yeah, I think that it was reasonable going into the tournament not to have Mayhem listed too high. You know, I think that they played Boston twice. They played, I believe, the Justice and the Titans as well. So like again, all of the teams that they beat were certainly lower tier, and that doesn't give any indication that you should be able to kind of hold your own against the Shock as well as the Fusion, especially in the semifinals and the finals of a bracket. But they showed that's possible. And I think that there's, despite the great showing from the Florida Mayhem, there is still something for them to prove. Like I talked about the Fusion versus the Mayhem game, where I felt like the Florida Mayhem were playing at their peak potential, and I didn't feel like the Fusion were. If this, they really came into their own. They found a composition that worked. They were playing heroes that they were comfortable on, and they were just clicking. Things were rolling for them. They were doing really well. But especially with hero pools, what happens in the meta where they don't have something where they can play what they're comfortable with, or what they're comfortable with simply is at a lower power rating. I think that I would like to see the consistency of them kind of pulling. If they can consistently find something that they're just like, this is what we're playing, and they're even going to roll it on attack, defense, Temple of Anubis every single time, just like roll it everywhere, sort of thing. If they can find that and make it work more than once, then sure, at that point I'll be like, buy Mayhem stocks. But right now they had a great performance, and I think that they had a great composition, played characters that they were comfortable in. It worked out for them. But I'm going to have to see it more than once before I really consider them at least a top three team.
I'm all in currently because we saw them play like one of their hugest weaknesses was like around May play, I think. And Yaki started out terrible on May, and towards the end of their last showings on May, he was actually looking really good. And then we got to see him flex onto Echo and Tracer moving in to the May melee.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was one of their biggest weaknesses. And BQB is an actual nut. And like I've shown a lot of flexibility, so I actually feel the by far their only pressure point for me currently is Chris. Where it seems like their compositions very much rely on Chris not being on Lucio to win the game. So
I think another weakness for them as well was Fate, though. I think that Fate struggled compared to the other.
Really, I was pretty I think Fate played actually very well within the confines of what their comp was supposed to be, because their whole comp was supposed to be like Fate is playing Orisa as Reinhardt, essentially.
Yes.
Like they were essentially trying to use the Orisa as like a very aggressive halt mechanic, just like AoE, like control area control beast, versus someone that's hyper aggro versus someone that's meant for poke.
Yeah, I don't think that Fate played kind of poorly overall, but I think that there were actually quite a few fights that were lost because he overextended or misplayed it. Like, on average, he played quite well, but I think he was one of the ones, Chris, obviously, as you mentioned, but Fate was probably the second guy that I'd be looking at is the one who would have been responsible for the most amount of fight losses from early deaths, whether it was from overextension or something like that. But yeah, it's the amount of times that happened, even the amount of times that Chris caused a fight to be lost, I think was really quite low. But they were very much clearly, those two players were the ones who I would say individual mistakes led to team fight losses instead of kind of like team strategy or tactics being insufficient or not being executed properly.
But overall, still, regardless if you don't think they're a top 2 team, you should at least be very confident in Mayhem moving forward, I think.
Yes.
Is a fair point, right? Like that's I think by far the most salient point, like going forward. And secondly, besides the Mayhem, is Shock, I think, has redeemed themselves now to say, like, I don't think we can ever realistically doubt Shock. Like if they're given enough time, they will be like, with enough time, Shock will almost always be like a top 2 team, like it seems like there is nothing, like they might start slow. I think that is a valid criticism, as they start slow in metas. But at this point, they've also, because of hero pools allowing teams to sort of explore all the options early into this season, I think that now Shock is also going to be, because I talked about this earlier, is like hero pools, and we both talked about this, the hero pools force teams to go out their comfort zone and learn different styles. which wouldn't have ever happened in other seasons previously. And now, since Shock has already sort of begun the exploratory research of Krusty sitting there in his lab and finding the perfect formula and roiding out all of his players individually with a little bit of brain juice, is that since they've spent this early sort of like what would be discovery work in with the meta, I think they're going to be insanely strong moving forward, unless like Team 4 comes out with like a, by the way, no, like some crazy something insane that we wouldn't have
Even
expected,
then,
you know?
they'll figure it out eventually. I think that San Francisco Shock was definitely a team that we were talking about early in the season as the teams that was very heavily focused towards being able to really truly refine and perfect metas.
Yeah,
But then the Krusty interview that came out, and I know that you haven't read it yet, but
I haven't.
Krusty spoke to two of the losses from the San Francisco Shock early in the season, and I think that his answer really did confirm the fact that they struggled to adapt. You know, they maybe tried to lock into a composition or a decision on what to play too early in the week, and then when something was found later on, you know, they stuck to their guns and they were trying to perfect a suboptimal composition. I think that cost them. But he was talking in kind of how they changed their strategy and how they were going to adapt and try and find their new strategy starting in week 9. And it seems to have worked out well for them. So, you know, even a team like the San Francisco Shock, which is better at perfecting than adapting, you know, it seems like they're perfecting the ability to adapt, if you will. You know,
Yeah.
and they're doing quite well at it. And I want to move in from the Shock to talking about the Fuel, because that was actually the other part. Like in the Asian bracket, we disagreed on the Spark versus the Dynasty match, but in the North American side, we disagreed in the potential results between.
Do I get to hear? Do I get to hear my? You were right. Do I get to
you?
hear it?
You were right.
Okay, go on.
You told me so, but
I mean, now we're both tied, right?
yeah,
we're both
yeah,
we're
one to one for Preds.
So we're 1-1.
But yeah, and then I think against the Shock, when the Fuel played against the Shock, I was almost disappointed at the levels of Shock's play. And I think one of the more interesting things that came out of this, again, once in Shock or in the interview with Krusty, was the fact that he said that they were worried about the Fuel, and that they thought that it would be better to simply pick them, not because they were weak, but to get them out of the way early. And they thought there were other weaker opponents that they could have gone with, but they played against the Fuel, you know, to knock them out early, to make sure that they wouldn't become a problem and meet them later on in the bracket. And I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, Krusty and the Shock are going to have more experience from scrims on teams' power levels. So, you know, compared to the rest of the observers whose recent experience on the Dallas Fuel was their Lone Star Showdown results, as well as their game against the Paris Eternal, you know, like Lone Star Showdown, they lost that. It was in no hero pool meta. And then the Paris Eternal, which is already looking like a little bit of a weak team, they got absolutely shut out. And I understand that the Dallas Fuel had a poor week, but, you know, a poor week like that, there's no guarantee when that week is going to end and come back to form. But based off of the performance of the Fuel this weekend, as well as the comments from Krusty, it seems like the Fuel shook off this 1 week of just being pants on head, and really came back, not only returned to form, but maybe even a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I think they were very much at risk for me. I was about to give them the execution of like, you are no longer deserving of the mid table slot. Goodbye and good luck, Dallas Fuel, and they would have fallen to the depths of pagadom, as I would say, the depths
Yeah.
of, not quite that far, honestly. Like, I wouldn't throw them around with Titans and Justice, but like they would be a team that was now looking to achieve mediocrity at mid table versus a team that's holding on to it. And so I do think it was very lucky that they're not lucky, but it was good. It was a good showing for them, and also remains to be seen of how good like they actually can perform moving forward, because it seems like a huge portion of that is just reliant on Decay just absolutely going beast mode
Yeah.
and taking them to maps where they honestly shouldn't have won at points. Which is technically, yeah, sure, your team's gonna level up because you have a player that's such a beast, but it's much like I would say, like, if I sat in my chair every day and I lifted weights, I would have really big, you know, I did curls every day. Like, I would have huge biceps, but my legs would atrophy. And that's how I feel about the Fuel, in that like they have some massive biceps on them, but as soon as they get up to start, as soon as they have to get on the legs to start going the distance, they just like crumble like a bunch of toothpicks. And like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about the team and Decay and its function within it.
I think there was
I need a lot more rounding out.
I did look at I've looked at some of the matches, some of the maps between the Dallas Fuel and the Houston Outlaws in more depth, so I think I can speak to this with a little bit more certainty. But I do think that previously I'd agree with you that like the DPS were doing the heavy lifting, especially in a meta or an era of Overwatch where the DPS are back into a point where they can be more of carry players. There is that higher carry potential for DPS players than there has been kind of in recent history. But in the games from the May Melee tournament this weekend, I think that Doha really was struggling, to the point of being a weak point. And I think that a lot of the criticisms around the Fuel's support and tank lineups have been, I won't say fixed or solved, but certainly improved, especially on Blizzard World, where they just lost the first point in the first fight. They just completely fell over, and the Houston Outlaws used that to complete the full map. And then not only did the Dallas Fuel kind of struggle in the taking of the first point, but once they got onto second and third, like they consistently improved throughout the match, and most of those improvements and adaptations did come from adjustments to both the support and the tank's playstyle. So they're seeming to work more together. They're not going with simply prepared strats. They're not being tied down and not being able to adapt mid game. And I think that the adaptation from the Dallas Fuel has been one of the weaker takes. So definitely saw improvements in the support, like big improvements in the support and the tank line, coupled with Doha's decrease in ability or power level here. I think that if Doha during this coming break can pick it up, I think that Fuel does have the ability to reach a little bit higher than they have so far this season.
Yeah, I'll have to keep a track on them. I'm not huge. Like Albert had a take in chat saying that like it's like Effect 2.0, but I don't think that's quite fair because I do think overall the Fuel roster and adaptability, like I said, is far better. And also, I don't think Decay ever sacrifices his team's position for picks, like for frags. Like I think affected for previous Fuel iterations. Um, but I'm still there's still a lot lacking for Fuel for me to ever really currently think that they have a shot of getting super far in like a playoff tournament style,
Mm-hmm.
unless it happens to be like off of a back of like a decay carry. Like I need to see more improvements overall across the overall lineup. And I who else has improved a lot, by the way, besides Fuel, because I think we've really hit about all the portions we can for them, is Boston.
Yes.
Boston took Eternal to a map 5 after just recently beating Gladiators. And I do think that like, and I talked, ColorX came on my stream actually during the games after they got eliminated, and he was talking to me about how they just feel reinvigorated. Like
Yes.
it's not like anything's changed in terms of their lineup other than Punk. It's not like they have suddenly exchanged out all their players to their staff. They just feel better. And I don't know if that's just like strong like oceanic energy radiating from Boston now that they have Color Hex and also they have Punk in close proximity together. Just very strong oceanic energy, but they are clearly feeling a lot better on their mentals. And I do think that like that's arguably 70% of playing in the Overwatch League is just not booming. You
Yeah,
know?
and it definitely seems like the Boston Uprising previously was just trying to survive, and now they are trying to actually thrive a little bit and succeed. And I don't remember which commentator mentioned it, but I really liked, how much it is. Florida Mayhem is a demonstration of if you can find a play style that you're good at and you can make the opponent play your game, you're at a massive advantage. And that's where kind of confidence and this extra energy does really go hand in hand. And the Boston Uprising is able to actually kind of come up with a plan and stick to it and try and make the opponent play their game where they're comfortable instead of just simply reacting and trying to, just barely hold on as they slowly lose ground. So, morale and all those qualitatives, all of those kind of like soft skills that a team have, they're really hard to identify from, just an analyst or an audience perspective, but they do make an absolutely massive deal. And it is, morale is a big deal. And Boston having that reinvigoration coming in and being able to be a bit more aggressive and proactive in their games, they almost took it to the Paris Eternal, which would have been a massive and very rapid turnaround.
But we've seen this before, though. Is the thing is like before everyone gets all crazy on the like before we double the 4 Boston fans to the 8 Boston fans and get some exponential growth here. We have seen teams that have played very poorly have a resurgence and have a reset of the mental for a bit and then plummet again because the structures and the talent still aren't there,
Yeah.
like, and most notably, who's a really obvious example? The Fuel.
Yes,
The Fuel was a really obvious example. And the Justice. and
And
the
the Houston
justice as well.
Outlaws post acquisition.
Yes, like there are a lot of examples of like of a team win, because winning fixes all ailments. Chat, all the
Yeah.
chatters and all the people watching this, winning is the solution to all problems. But the thing about winning is that it doesn't actually solve anything. It just puts it underneath the rug, and then eventually, once you trip, the rug is going to flip over, and all that crap is still there. But now that you're losing, it has not actually been fixed. It has simply hidden the problems. And I think that like sometimes a mental reset can change that, but unless
Yeah.
some of the fundamental issues within Boston are fixed, uh, then I don't think that's going to change anything. Unless somehow this is like a selfless 2.0, where like the transformation from selfless back when they were actually a pretty poor team with even with DeFran back at before Overwatch League, to their state right before to their state where they're actually one of the the best team in North America outside of like Envy or Rogue, or example. Like it was just that they flipped the switch and realized this is how we need to play. This is how we need to play. This is how we need to play. And which could happen for Boston, but I'm not quite sure that is it yet. I feel like this is just a team that is probably just unboomed, and there's still a lot of Overwatch left to go and a
Yeah.
lot of structure to be tested.
Yeah, these changes that kind of give people a lot of energy, it never lasts, sort of thing. Like when you have the teams that kind of win consistently, they're the people who are going to stay disciplined and stay focused even when they are winning. No relaxation, no kind of coasting or anything like that. And so Boston trying to convert this newfound energy and synergy into long-term success, certainly yet to be seen, but I'm definitely list them as promising at the very
Promising.
least.
You don't have to feel like you're in a black hole of despair when you know it's a Boston game. It's like you would show up and be like, "Oh, no, 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 Boston game." Like, but now
Yeah.
I actually feel I feel hopeful. I feel very much more happy to see, and I'm glad that the
Yeah.
players are doing better and in a better environment. Hopefully, I'm also hopeful for Titans moving forward. They debuted Shockwave, a player during this
Oh man, he
tournament.
was
He was nuts.
crazy.
He was good. He was really good. Like I have to say that overall for the Titans, they took. It was still too early to say Titans good. I don't think that's the case at all
No,
yet.
I mean, just
There- a lot of room to grow for the
yeah.
Titans, but it's a step in the right direction. To go to a close map 5 versus Defiant, who is not obviously a great team either,
And
but
the
is at least
Defiant
above.
Fair also they had a new player come in their very first game ever, Zyke, and Surefour was not playing. Neither was the Agilities. So
Mhm.
Toronto Defiant also understandably was playing worse. I suppose they had their own rookie, and I think that in the battle of the rookies, Shockwave just knocked it out of the park. But yeah, I mean it was a good sign that the Titans picked up such a breath of fresh air in terms of a player. We'll have to see how they perform against teams better than the Defiant. But moving on, I did see one comment in chat. I wanted to get there anyway, but one of the things that we were looking for from this tournament was also indications about which way the Gladiators are moving. Because when we're talking about Boston's morale and mental, they've had such a giant kind of jump up that's really, as the word you used was invigorated the team. The Gladiators was a potential to go the opposite direction. Now, they won their first match against the Washington Justice 3-0, but then they fell against a very, very strong team in the Philadelphia Fusion 3-1. Was there enough information or gameplay or results from this weekend in order for us to actually make the judgment of whether or not the Gladiators are actually, as chat says, hyper omega boomed, or are they looking okay?
Um, I they didn't look as the thing is getting 3-1 by Fusion doesn't necessarily mean you're terrible, right? And it doesn't mean you're necessarily boomed. They also 3-0'd pretty decisively Justice. So they didn't struggle against teams they shouldn't struggle against. Because like at the
I mean, that's good.
like a definitive booming, like a pretty definitive, like if I were to if I were to don my lab coat, my scrubs and get my stethoscope and go and become Dr. Boom, Dr. Avast, and check for boomings, and I'd look for teams, I'd move it about. Like some of the clear signs for a diagnosis is struggling against teams you shouldn't struggle against. It is also making stupid posts on Twitter. There's another one. Like, and I didn't really see too much of either. For Glads and the main melee. I also think Glads decided to stop making square wheels and go back to the classic round wheel for
Yeah.
transportation, because it's very clear that Glads currently are very one-dimensional, and they need a style that is very aggressive, and that's what they tried to use a lot during the tournament, and it paid them a lot more dividends than any sort of other style, even though they had any sort of options available to them with no hero pools. And I think that's going to still be a problem for them because they're so one dimensional currently. But it does it. But if they also stick to their strengths, it also means they will never get totally rolled and smoked like they have in the past, I think,
Mhm.
either.
All right. Are there any other games that you want to talk about, go over from this weekend, or do we want to move on and discuss the June format, and I suppose format for the rest of the Overwatch League going forward?
I think my final comment about the NA bracket is uh we have two missing players if anyone has found them.
Erster?
Actually, Erster, and also most notably, I also on top of that, it's not even a missing player, but I'm not. It's really only one. It's Erster, and then also secondly, I want to know. I'm really excited to see how Sparkle debuts for the Paris. I
Yeah,
think
May
Sparkle
31st.
changes. Sparkle changes a lot of things for Paris, and hopefully Xe gets better soon. Though he says he still has problems. But Sparkle I think changes a lot of things for Paris Eternal. Um, so I'm interested to see that. Surefour, I wouldn't count as a missing player because even with Surefour playing, I'm still not big on Defiant. So I'm sorry, chat. I don't care if Surefour is playing for the Defiant. I don't think they win anything either ways. So I have no.
Win anything.
I don't think they win. They get close to even be mid table still. Um, in addition, in addition, Valiant. I think I'm feeling. I felt low on Valiant. Um, at times, but I've still had faith in Packington. But I think it's just invigorated that once again, leading back to that tweet, it shows coaching staffs make all the difference, and Packington continues to do a great job with the Valiant.
Mhm.
So everyone should still be high on Valiant moving forward too. I think
Yeah,
if anything, I might be a little. I should have been. I was too low on them. I should have put them a little bit higher in my last ranking. So
Valiant definitely seems like a team that's going to be slowly but almost unstoppably marching forward. At least that's the mentality I get from packing is
yeah,
that very kind of like grind mentality where it's not expecting big results in the short term, laying those good foundations and building up a championship team slowly over time, just like you kind of said that London was doing. So I think
and that's
that,
what Shock did, for example, as well. For
yeah, I mean, they
if we
forfeited
track them from
basically the
season
entire
one
first
to
season.
now, yeah,
Yeah.
like
So,
it's a slow process, but Valiant are building results. So I think
mm,
everyone should be happy with Valiant's performance, and they should continue to see them rise potentially. But we're running a little long, and we need to get into our next topic.
yeah.
Jane
So
Asor.
we are on break now. So the Overwatch League is going to be returning mid-June. So we're going to be returning the June 13th and 14th, and we are going to be having more of these regional tournaments. So first of all, the viewership was massively increased. I think that it peaked at 82,000 this past weekend on YouTube. Now, of course, it's not just the regional tournament that was due to that increase. Tokens were also included this weekend for those watching on the Overwatch League app or the website. So that's obviously going to increase viewership. But overall, I think the experience was a lot better. And, we've talked about this before, but the regional tournaments allows us to see more games from the good teams. The teams that historically we'd kind of just been like, oh, do we have to watch another one of these games? Or the games that over the weekend kind of some of them just didn't matter.
I
People
mean,
didn't care
people don't
about.
even they don't even start this. People stop saying, "Do I have to watch these games?" They just don't say anything, don't watch it, because they're
Yeah,
like, "Yeah, it's not interesting to me,"
yeah.
like that's it. That's how regular season is. And I swear, if I see another person tell me that regular season is fun and interesting, I'm going to bang my head into a sharp corner. I will. I'll do it.
I'll provide you with a rusty spoon in order to
Yeah.
gouge your eyes out. How's that?
I
Make
just
you
don't
feel
want to
better?
hear it. I don't it doesn't make me feel any better because I know even with my blindness, the
Yeah.
comments will still be there. They'll still be there. You can't release the information. And it's just
I
terrible.
I think one of the I see it in chat. Somebody said the production, like yeah, the production this weekend really, it was quite annoying. A lot of pixelation, a lot of audio troubles. Even the VOD on the Seoul Dynasty Shanghai Dragons game is about like 6 or 7 seconds delayed. So a lot of technical issues too during
Yeah.
the production. I hope they can fix that over for June. But that
I mean,
did
and there
make
are a
it,
lot of circumstances regarding production,
yeah,
right? Like I think other people definitely have slightly better insight into that than us necessarily, right? Like
yeah.
y- um but I mean, I think they publicly stated that they were planning to use the system this year for the homestands, and because of the fact that they would go remote, that system wasn't at all ready to go remote, and so they just shoehorned it in, and it's resulted in various other problems with their production software and their process and stuff like that. And there's always going to be different problems with that, but it's not regardless of what the excuses are. You can make excuses as much as you want and say like, "Oh, this is whatever, whatever." It doesn't matter what if it's right, if it's justified that it's bad, right? It just matters that it's bad.
Hmm. Absolutely.
That's at the end of the day.
And then now they have like it's a 3 week break until we see Overwatch again. Um, but yeah, I think that it is a really strong decision to move towards more of these regional tournaments. I think that the stage playoffs were a big thing that people were looking forward to. And then I was actually watching. You had a show earlier today with Monty, Harsha, and Packing, I believe it
Yes,
was. And then
it was.
Harsha had the opinion that these kind of tournament brackets should be held more along the homestands to make them more exciting. He was making the point that it was going to be harder to sell out homestands if they were just regular season games, as opposed to kind of actually seeing a tournament bracket being crowned with a championship game every single
Mhm.
time that you attend one of these events, which I think is a really cool opinion, and that is
Yeah.
closer to how the Call of Duty League is actually doing it right now.
It's much better overall, and it loop us back into our topic of like the regular season versus like the tournament seeding. And people are like, "Well, how do you seed these tournaments?" Like because there always going to be another tournament. They announced. They said there's going to be one for June,
Hmm.
and obviously they'll keep probably a very similar format to how the May one was because it makes the most sense for right now, where you just play your online three games or so, and then it seeds you into the tournament,
Yep.
which is perfectly fine for our current system because there's not much else to be done about it, and I think it's a good solution. But I will say that like moving forward, especially if we get back to our live event model and COVID has eased a bit, uh, tournaments give us so many options to not only make these venues very efficient and these homestands efficient in terms of a monetary wise for organizations, right? Because teams have to invest a lot of money in these events, and realistically, no one is actually getting a return on them currently. No one. Like
No.
it is just it's an investment for the future. It's an investment to build a market, to showcase a product, to show to sponsors and such like that. But no one is actually making anything back on it currently. While especially if you're going to host 5 regular season homestand games, like that's just ridiculous, and they're only going to decrease in the how populated they were and how many people attended, as they moved on, like Harsha said. So I think having a tournament model makes them a lot more exciting, and you can make them less frequent, so you don't have to spend as much hosting as
Yes.
many venues. You have a lot of options to make that happen. And you could even, and people are also worried about like the side of like, well, if I'm a sponsor and I bought into a league, I want X amount of time to my team to play because I need the airtime. I need to have guaranteed return. Well, it's like, oh, you could still guarantee that with a tournament style. Just like if your team loses in one regional tournament or however we end up this hypothetical model works, what if we have like a toilet bowl tournament? But it's not going to be called the toilet bowl tournament, right? But like
But we'll know.
you
But
can
we'll
lose
know.
in a tournament and go play in like a in like a losers tournament to make it up to that qualifying that that
Yeah.
final regional playoff tournament. You have a lot of flexibility and a lot of options for tournaments to also increase the airtime for organizations.
Yeah, you can also like change the format. The current format is single elimination, but you could easily go to like starting with a round
Hmm.
robin format into seeding a single elimination, or you could do double elimination brackets. There's lots of different ways that you could adjust the format to make it
Yeah.
more well suited towards the actual kind of homestand tournament format. And I think it's a great idea. I think that there's a lot of benefits, and at least the viewership has shown that the audience appreciates it as well.
I also see that Tax Syndrome says my real question was, do you think Blizzard willing to pay the money for monthly tournaments? Is like, but Blizzard isn't really footing the bills for these tournaments.
No.
Like the teams are the ones running the venues. Like that's the whole thing. It's like no one like it's not like the league in NFL or NBA is paying for tournament for the venues either. It's the franchises. Like the franchise is the one that foot. It's not that the league doesn't foot bills. They foot the bills for the production cost and for the broadcast and such, but they're not footing the bills for the actual venues. So like it's really our model should be more of like what's better for generate for the franchises, because if the franchises lose their asses every year, then what's the justification for staying there, right? It's like you can monetize it to hell or high water, but the franchises still have to be getting a return out of it necessarily.
Hmm.
I meant the prize pools, you can just repurpose the same money that we have now. Just repurpose the same money we have for Overwatch League into the tournament format, right? It's the same. There's no difference. There's like $4 million in prize pool, I think, this year, if not more.
Yes, that is
Like
correct.
Imagine how far $4 million goes in a tournament style format. Imagine if you have multiple $500,000 tournaments, or you have like like the toilet bowl one is like 250. The smaller regional ones are like 250. Then you have 500. You know, there's a lot of options and flexibility there. Like you have so much to work with realistically when you have a whole block of time and a whole league that is gonna listen to a front office.
Speaking of time, we are quickly running out of it, but we had a mailbag last weekend where we were asking people to give us the craziest predictions that they had going into the May Melee tournament. And of course, the prize for predicting something was a VIP badge on the channel. So we had two individuals who had correct predictions. The first of which we've already awarded the VIP badge to. It was Fel Batista predicted that Charge would lose in the semis, which we thought was quite unlikely to happen, but it did manage to come true. And then Just Very Tired also predicted Mayhem beating the Fusion. So he even predicted the correct scoreline as well for that, being 3-1.
Wow.
So,
Someone also Wedge also said Wedge. What is this? Is that numbers on the other? It says 117230. I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, but they said that Dynasty makes it to the finals versus the Dragons, which is correct. But then it says the Dynasty then beat the Dragons without playing Ryan. So not
almost
not as much correct.
Just ignore the complete reverse sweep part of
Not
that.
as much correct, but they definitely got the first part right.
Yeah.
So I'll give them that.
Nobody on the Reddit thread got their guess correct, but Fel Batista and Just Very Tired both nailed their predictions. So Logan, if our producer man is paying attention, Just Very Tired is in chat, so he's going to need that VIP badge. So
I think it's always nice. That's another benefit as well to these things in chat, also for you guys and for us, is that tournaments also just increase our engagement, right? Like every time you guys want to be like, oh man, I have this guy to win the tournament. Like I have this dark horse to win the tournament. Like it's just so exciting for everybody. And if you really think that tournaments, because also I've heard like, well, tournaments will get stale too if you play them all the time. But it's like, okay, like so if tournaments get stale, that's no different than what we have now, right? Except now we actually have stuff that's boring but still has stakes. But there is no downside to doing it at all.
We just don't listen to those people. We just don't listen to those people.
There is no downside. There's more bingos to be had. Exactly, Brandon. There's more bingos to be had. We have so many. The possibilities are endless. Everyone, let your mind explode. Okay, let it explore what we could do with tournaments. Let it enter your soul and exit your soul. And it's just like we don't have to be constrained to this earthly realm of regular season.
I don't think we'd planned out a mailbag for this week, but did you have anything that you wanted to ask chat to be answered on Thursday?
I think we should ask chat what would be their ideal system for Overwatch League, right? Like how would you make it happen? And do not say more regular season.
Regular season.
Don't say it.
Regular season.
Don't say it. I will find you and I will ban you. Don't do it.
Regular season.
But how about you give us your examples of what? Because there's a lot of different options here to how to sort of make a tournament style work within the league. There's so many different ways we could implement it. Well, not us in particular, Jayne, but other people.
You and I personally.
You and I personally will be the architects.
We're suiting up and we're gonna make it happen.
But let us know in the YouTube comments or also in the Reddit thread on competitive Overwatch that will pop up. Is what do you think is that systems what would be the best style system for you guys? What would be the most exciting for you? What would be the best stakes? The best way to monetize it? All the other options. Just hit us with your best shot.
Yeah, give us a production deck and we'll go pitch it for you.
Yeah. Let's go MLB and do 162 games a year. No. Don't think I will.
Yeah, I'm good too. Pass.
Don't think I will.
Well, that's your Tuesday episode of Contested. I hope you guys enjoyed your stay, regardless of whether you are watching live on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter. Of course, if you want to participate in the mailbag, the YouTube video is going to be posted the day after the show goes live, and you can post your question, your thoughts, your comments, concerns, queries, and pregnancies in the comment section of that video.
Is that pregnancies?
No, you heard things.
Okay.
Now, if you're listening pre-recorded on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I hope you enjoyed your show as well. And we will be back this Thursday at 5 p.m. Central for the next episode of Contested. I'm Jayne, this is Avast, and this has been Contested.